He married an alien princess, but what she did on their first night shocked him. The diplomatic union captain Daniel Reyes adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform for the third time, his reflection staring back from the polished viewport of the Earth Embassy ship. The ceremony would begin in an hour, and his hands hadn't stopped trembling since dawn. At 32, he'd faced down hostile alien fleets and negotiated treaties in war zones. But nothing had prepared him for this, marrying a complete stranger from another world. The marriage to Princess Zelia of the Zithari Empire wasn't born of romance, but necessity. After 3 years of tense negotiations, following the border skirmishes of 2387, both species needed something concrete to ensure lasting peace. The Zithari had proposed the ancient tradition of bonding their royal bloodline with Earth's most respected diplomatic family. The Reyes lineage had served in interstellar relations for generations. Daniel's sister Catalina had been the obvious choice, but her recent assignment to the Outer Rim meant Daniel inherited the responsibility. "Think of it as the ultimate diplomatic mission," Fleet Admiral Torres had said, clapping him on the shoulder. 6 months of marriage, public appearances, then a quiet annulment. "You'll be saving both our species." Through the viewport, Daniel watched the massive Zithari ceremonial ship approach, a beautiful, organic-looking vessel that seemed grown rather than built. Its bioluminescent hull pulsed with soft purple and gold patterns, reminding him of deep-sea creatures from Earth's oceans. The sight was breathtaking and intimidating in equal measure. His communication device chimed. "Captain Reyes, the princess's escort vessel is requesting permission to board for the pre-ceremony briefing," announced Lieutenant Commander Vasquez, his aide-de-camp. "Granted," Daniel replied, straightening his shoulders. He'd studied Zithari customs for months, learned basic phrases in their musical language, and memorized every protocol. What he hadn't prepared for was the emotional weight of committing his life, even temporarily, to someone whose face he'd only seen in holographic transmissions. The airlock hissed open, and Daniel's first glimpse of Zithari nobility took his breath away. Princess Zelia's entourage moved with fluid grace, their pale, luminescent skin seeming to glow from within. They wore flowing robes that shifted color as they moved, and their elongated features held an otherworldly beauty that made Daniel feel suddenly clumsy and human. But it was Princess Zelia herself who commanded attention. Taller than he'd expected, with golden hair that seemed to catch and hold light, she moved toward him with regal composure. Her pale skin had an almost translucent quality, and when their eyes met, Daniel felt an unexpected jolt of recognition, as if they'd known each other in another life. "Captain Reyes," she said, her accented English melodic and precise. "I am honored to meet my intended." Her red ceremonial dress caught the light, intricate patterns woven into the fabric that seemed to move independently. "Princess Zelia," Daniel replied, offering the formal bow he'd practiced. "The honor is mine." She studied his face with intense curiosity, her violet eyes seeming to peer directly into his soul. "You are nervous," she observed, not unkindly. "Wouldn't you be?" Daniel asked, attempting levity. A ghost of a smile crossed her features. "Indeed, this arrangement serves our peoples well, but it is unprecedented for both of us." As her advisors and his diplomatic team discussed final ceremony details, Daniel found himself stealing glances at his bride-to-be. She was beautiful, certainly, but there was something else, a sadness in her eyes that spoke of burdens beyond her years. "The ceremony will be broadcast across both our worlds," she said quietly, stepping closer. "After tonight, our lives will never be private." Again, Daniel nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Are you ready for that?" Princess Zelia's expression grew distant. "I have been preparing my entire life to sacrifice personal desires for duty. But tonight," she paused, looking directly at him, "tonight will change everything, Daniel Reyes. More than you know." Her words carried an ominous undertone that made Daniel's pulse quicken. But before he could ask what she meant, the ceremony coordinators called them to their positions. The marriage that would bind two worlds was about to begin. Secrets beneath the surface. The grand ballroom of the embassy ship had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystalline chandeliers from zither cast prismatic rainbows across the walls, while Earth's finest musicians played alongside Zithari harmony singers, whose voices created ethereal melodies that seemed to resonate in Daniel's very bones. Representatives from dozens of worlds had gathered to witness this historic union. Daniel stood at the altar, watching Princess Zelia approach down an aisle lined with bioluminescent flowers that pulsed gently with her heartbeat, a Zithari tradition he found both beautiful and unnerving. She wore an elaborate gown that shifted from deep red to golden hues, and a crown of living crystal that seemed to grow from her own hair. The ceremony itself was a careful blend of both cultures. Ambassador Hernandez spoke of humanity's hopes for lasting peace, while High Counselor Vexithan sang ancient Zithari blessings in their native tongue. Daniel repeated vows in both languages, promising to honor and protect his bride, while Zelia's responses carried melodic undertones that made his heart race. When they exchanged rings, as a simple gold band, hers a complex crystalline structure that bonded with her skin, Daniel felt a strange tingling sensation. The princess's eyes widened slightly, as if she'd felt it too. By the laws of Earth and Zither, you are now bonded in marriage, Ambassador Hernandez announced. The crowd erupted in applause as Daniel and Zelia shared their first kiss, brief, formal, but carrying an unexpected electric charge that left them both breathless. The reception that followed was a diplomatic masterpiece. Daniel found himself swept from conversation to conversation, shaking hands with admirals and alien dignitaries, always with Zelia gracefully at his side. She played her role perfectly, the devoted new bride supporting her husband's career. But Daniel noticed how her smile never quite reached her eyes during a brief lull. As they stood together watching the mixed crowd of humans and Zithari mingling, Daniel leaned closer to his wife. "You're an excellent actress," he murmured. "As are you," she replied, her voice barely audible above the music. "But this performance has only just begun." "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, High Counselor Vexithan approached, his tall frame casting a shadow over them. "Princess," he said in accented English, "it grows late. Perhaps it is time for the traditional private ceremonies." Daniel noticed the way Zelia's posture straightened, tension flowing through her body like electricity. "Of course, honored Counselor, we should not delay tradition." As they made their polite excuses and slipped away from the reception, Daniel felt increasingly uneasy. "Zelia, what private ceremonies? This wasn't mentioned in any of the briefings I received." She paused in the corridor, her violet eyes reflecting the soft lighting. "Daniel, there are aspects of Zithari marriage that cannot be shared with outsiders. Your diplomatic team was told only what they needed to know for the public ceremony." "What are you talking about?" She took his hand, her skin surprisingly warm. "In my culture, the public ceremony is merely theater, pretty words and rings for the cameras. The true marriage, the binding that makes it legal under Zithari law, can only happen in private, between the two souls who choose to become one." Daniel's stomach clenched. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Zelia said, leading him toward the private quarters that had been prepared for them, "that everything changes tonight. The person you married today was Princess Zelia performing her duty. The woman you will meet in that room is someone else entirely." They stopped before an ornate door that Daniel didn't remember seeing. During his earlier tour of the ship, Zithari symbols glowed faintly around its frame, and he could swear he heard a low humming coming from beyond it. "I need you to understand something," Zelia said, turning to face him fully. "What happens tonight cannot be undone. Once we complete the ritual of soul binding, we will be connected in ways that transcend anything your people understand about marriage. We will share memories, emotions, even dreams." Daniel's mouth went dry. "That wasn't in the treaty negotiations, because your negotiators wouldn't have agreed to it," she admitted. "They think this is a temporary arrangement, 6 months of public appearances, then separation. But Zithari law doesn't recognize temporary bonds. Once we are truly married, we are bound until death." The corridor seemed to grow colder round them. "Are you saying I've been tricked into a permanent alien marriage?" "I'm saying," Zelia replied, her composure finally cracking to reveal something vulnerable underneath, That both our governments have asked us to sacrifice more than they have the right to ask. The question is, will you trust me long enough to learn the truth?" She placed her palm against the door, and it dissolved like morning mist, revealing a chamber unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. The chamber of truth, the room beyond the dissolving door, defied every law of physics. Daniel thought he understood. The space seemed impossibly vast, stretching into darkness in all directions, yet intimate at the same time. Bioluminescent vines hung from an invisible ceiling, casting soft blue and purple light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The floor beneath his feet felt like living wood, warm and slightly yielding. "Welcome to the next Thyra," Zelia said, her voice carrying a reverence he hadn't heard before. "The chamber of truth. It exists partially in your dimension and partially in what you might call spiritual space." Daniel stepped forward cautiously, his rational mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This is impossible. The ship's schematics showed only standard quarters behind that door. Human instruments cannot detect Zathari sacred spaces, Zelia explained, moving to the chamber's center where a circle of luminescent stones waited. "We exist partially outside what you consider normal reality. It's why your scientists have never fully understood our technology or our culture." As she spoke, Zelia began removing pieces of her elaborate wedding attire, not in a seductive manner, but with the solemnity of a priest preparing for ritual. Beneath the formal gown, she wore a simple red garment that hugged her pale form, the color seeming to pulse with its own inner light. "What exactly is going to happen here?" Daniel asked, his voice barely steady. "The bond of souls," Zelia replied, kneeling beside a collection of small bowls and what appeared to be painting implements. "In human terms, you might call it extreme emotional honesty. We will share our deepest memories, our greatest fears, our most carefully guarded secrets. Only then can true trust be established." She looked up at him, and for the first time since they'd met, her royal composure completely fell away. "Daniel, I need you to understand I've never done this before. Royal marriages are usually arranged between Zathari nobles who have known each other since childhood. This ritual with someone from another species, there's no precedent." Daniel sat across from her in the circle, studying her face in the soft light. "You're scared, terrified," she admitted. "The ritual will show you everything: my loneliness, my doubts, the weight of expectations I've carried since birth. You'll experience my memories as if they were your own, and I'll experience yours." She began mixing what looked like luminescent paint in one of the bowls. "Some of what you see may shock you. My people are not what your diplomats believe us to be. We have darkness in our past, Daniel. Violence, betrayal, things that would horrify your pacifist councils. And you think that will change how I see you?" Zelia paused in her preparations. "Won't it, when you feel the weight of decisions I've made, lives I've taken in the name of peace? When you experience the isolation of growing up as the only heir to a throne built on secrets?" Daniel reached across the circle and took her hands, surprised by their trembling. "Zelia, I've been a soldier. I've made decisions that haunt me, lost people I cared about, done things I'm not proud of. If you're looking for someone who'll judge you for having a complicated past, you married the wrong human." For the first time, her smile was genuine. "Perhaps that's why the council chose you specifically." "What do you mean?" "Your psychological profile, your military record, your personal losses, everything was carefully studied before this arrangement was proposed. They didn't want just any diplomat, Daniel. They wanted someone who might actually understand me." The implications of her words hit him like a physical blow. "This wasn't random. You requested me specifically." Zelia's blush was visible even in the strange light. "I may have influenced the selection process. When I saw your records, read about your service, learned about the brother you lost in the Titan incident, I knew you were someone who understood sacrifice." She began painting symbols on her own arms with the luminescent mixture, each mark seeming to glow brighter as it touched her skin. "I know this is overwhelming. If you want to stop, if you want to declare the marriage invalid and return to your ship, I won't blame you. But if we continue," she met his eyes, "there will be no more secrets between us, no more walls, no more pretending to be anything other than exactly who we are." Daniel watched the patterns she was creating on her skin. They seemed to tell a story, though he couldn't read their meaning. What happens if we don't complete this ritual? Then we remain married only in the eyes of human law. In 6 months, we can separate as planned, return to our respective duties, and pretend this never happened. Her voice grew quiet. But we'll never know what we might have had. And if we do complete it, then we become something new, Zelia said, offering him a brush dipped in the glowing paint. Not human, not Sithari, but something between, connected in ways that will last beyond death itself. Daniel took the brush, feeling its weight like a weapon in his hand. No pressure. Despite everything, Zelia laughed a sound like silver bells that filled the impossible chamber. I'm told humans appreciate honesty. So here's mine. I've spent my entire life alone, Daniel, surrounded by advisors and servants and politicians, but fundamentally, utterly alone. Tonight is my one chance to truly know another soul. She extended her arm toward him. Will you help me paint the symbols of binding? And will you let me paint them on you? Daniel looked at the brush, at her pale skin glowing in the ethereal light, at the hope and terror warring in her violet eyes. In that moment, he realized this decision would define not just his future, but the very core of who he was. The binding of Solzhenitsyn's hand trembled slightly as he touched the glowing brush. To Zelia's extended arm, the paint felt warm, almost alive, and as he began tracing the symbols, she guided him through. He could swear he felt her pulse through the connection. These marks tell the story of our joining, Zelia explained softly as Daniel painted intricate spirals along her forearm. Each symbol represents an aspect of the soul we're choosing to share: memory, emotion, dreams, fears. The painted symbols seemed to sink into her skin rather than simply resting on the surface, creating patterns that pulsed with her heartbeat. As Daniel worked, he found himself falling into a meditative rhythm, the rational part of his mind quieting as something deeper took over. Now you, Zelia said, taking the brush from his hands. Her touch was gentle, but sure as she began painting matching symbols on his skin. The moment the luminescent paint made contact, Daniel felt a jolt of electricity run through his entire body. Images flashed behind his closed eyelids, not his own memories, but glimpses of something else. A vast palace made of living crystal, a young girl sitting alone in a garden of impossible flowers, the weight of a crown that felt like chains. Do you feel it beginning? Zelia whispered, her voice seeming to come from inside his own thoughts. Yes. What are those images? Fragments of my life, bleeding through as the bond forms. She continued painting, each new symbol intensifying the connection. Soon, you'll experience them as fully as if they were your own memories. As she worked, Daniel found himself studying her face with new intensity. The formal mask she'd worn throughout the day had completely fallen away, revealing someone younger and more vulnerable than he'd imagined. Her pale skin seemed to glow from within, and her golden hair caught the chamber's light like spun starfire. There, she said, setting aside the brush, the preparation is complete. Are you ready for the final stage? Daniel looked down at his arms, now covered in glowing symbols that seemed to pulse in rhythm with hers. What happens now? Now we must share our deepest truths, Zelia said, moving to sit directly across from him in the circle. The memories that define us both, the beautiful and the terrible. The bond cannot form through surface thoughts alone. She reached out and took his hands, her skin now warm to the touch. I'll go first, to show you it's safe. The moment their painted symbols touched, the world exploded into sensation. Daniel found himself thrust into Zelia's memories as if they were his own experiences. A 5-year-old girl standing before a council of stern-faced aliens, learning that her parents had died in a political assassination, and she was now the sole heir to a crumbling empire. Years of isolation in the Crystal Palace, surrounded by teachers and advisors, but never allowed friends her own age. The weight of making life and death decisions before her 16th birthday, condemning rebels to death to maintain the peace her people desperately needed, standing alone on a balcony, looking out at the stars and wondering if she would spend her entire life as nothing more than a symbol. Daniel gasped as the memories receded, leaving him shaking. Zelia, I had no idea. Now you, she said gently, show me who you really are. Daniel hesitated, then opened his mind to the connection. His own memories flowed through the bond, 8 years old, watching his brother Marcus leave for military academy, promising to follow in his footsteps. The day he received news that Marcus had died in the Titan incident, his ship's life support, failing in the depths of space, years of throwing himself into diplomatic service, trying to honor his brother's memory by preventing the wars that had killed him, the crushing weight of negotiating peace treaties while knowing that every compromise meant someone else's family would be destroyed. Standing in his empty apartment after another failed relationship, realizing he'd become so focused on duty that he'd forgotten how to simply be human. As their shared memories swirled between them, Daniel felt something extraordinary happening. The loneliness he'd carried for years began to lift, replaced by a deep understanding of the woman across from him. She wasn't just an alien princess, she was someone who understood sacrifice, duty, and the price of putting others' needs before your own. "We're so alike," Zelia whispered, tears streaming down her luminescent cheeks. "Both of us shaped by loss, defined by duty, isolated by the roles we were born to play. But not alone anymore," Daniel said, feeling the truth of it resonate through their shared connection. The symbols on their skin began to glow brighter, and Daniel realized the chamber itself was responding to their bond. The bioluminescent vines pulsed more rapidly, and he could hear what sounded like distant music, or perhaps it was their synchronized heartbeats. "The bond is almost complete," Zelia said, her voice filled with wonder. "Daniel, can you feel it? The walls between us are dissolving." He could feel it, her emotions flowing through him like water, her thoughts becoming as familiar as his own. But more than that, he could sense her essence, the core of who she was beneath all the roles and responsibilities. "I can feel your heart," he whispered. "And I yours," she replied. "Daniel, I need you to know this isn't just political anymore. What's happening between us is real." As she spoke, the final barrier dissolved, and Daniel experienced something he'd never imagined possible. For one perfect moment, he wasn't Daniel Reyes, the diplomat or soldier. He wasn't human or bound by the limitations of his single perspective. He was part of something larger, a consciousness that included both himself and Zelia, their memories and emotions perfectly joined. In that moment of complete unity, he understood what love truly meant. Part 5. Beyond the stars, dawn light filtered through the chamber's impossible architecture as Daniel slowly returned to individual consciousness. The intense unity of the soul bond had gradually settled into something more manageable, a constant, warm awareness of Zelia's presence in his mind, like a second heartbeat that perfectly complemented his own. Zelia lay curled against his side, her golden hair spilled across his chest, the luminescent symbols on their skin now glowing with a steady, soft light that pulsed in unison. She stirred as he moved, her violet eyes opening to meet his with a depth of understanding that took his breath away. "Good morning, husband," she whispered, the word carrying weight it had never held before. "Good morning, wife," he replied, marveling at how natural it felt. Through their bond, he could sense her mixture of contentment and uncertainty about what came next. The ritual had changed them both fundamentally. They were no longer two separate beings who happened to be married, but something new, something that had never existed before in the history of either species. "The others will be expecting us for the morning briefings," Zelia said, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "Let them wait," Daniel replied, tightening his arms around her. "After what happened last night, I think we've earned a few hours to ourselves." She laughed, the sound creating harmonics he could feel through their connection. Spoken like someone who's never had to manage an interstellar empire. Spoken like someone who's finally learned there are more important things than duty. He corrected gently. Through the bond, he felt her surprise at his words, followed by a wave of emotion so intense it brought tears to both their eyes. In her memories, he'd experienced decades of believing that duty was all she would ever have, that personal happiness was a luxury princesses couldn't afford. "Daniel," she said, propping herself up to look at him directly, "what happens now? The bond we've formed, it's permanent. Even if our governments decide to end this arrangement, we'll always be connected. Are you worried about that?" he asked, though through their link he could already sense her complex mixture of hope and fear. "I'm terrified," she admitted, for the first time in my life. I have something I can't bear to lose. What if the peace negotiations fail? What if our people decide this union was a mistake? What if Daniel silenced her with a gentle kiss, pouring reassurance through their bond? Then we'll face it together, Zelia. I've spent my entire adult life trying to build bridges between worlds. Last night, we didn't just build a bridge, we became one. She studied his face, searching for any sign of doubt or regret. Instead, through their connection, she felt only his steady certainty and growing love. The others won't understand, she said quietly, when they realize what we've done. That this isn't the temporary political arrangement they expected. Then we'll help them understand, Daniel said firmly. We'll show them that peace doesn't have to be built on lies and careful diplomatic distance. We'll prove that real unity is possible. A soft chime echoed through the chamber, followed by Lieutenant Commander Vasquez's voice through the communication system. Captain Reyes, Princess Zelia. The morning briefing is scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. Daniel felt Zelia's automatic tension at the reminder of their public roles, but he squeezed her hand reassuringly. Ready to face the universe as a team, she smiled, and he felt her drawing strength from their bond. With you, I think I'm ready for anything. As they prepared to leave the sacred chamber and return to their public lives, Daniel marveled at how completely his world had changed in a single night. He'd entered the chamber as a reluctant participant in a political marriage, expecting to endure 6 months of awkward diplomacy. He was leaving as half of something unprecedented, a truly united consciousness spanning the species. Daniel, Zelia said as they reached the dissolving door. There's something else you should know about the bond we've formed. What? She smiled, an expression of pure joy that made his heart race. It's not just mental and emotional. The connection we've forged, it's already beginning to change us physically. Within a few months, we'll be able to share our life force itself. What humans call aging will slow dramatically for both of us. Are you saying we'll live as long as Zithari? I'm saying, she replied, stepping through the door and back into the regular world, that we'll have centuries together to perfect this unity we've begun. Centuries to show both our peoples what's possible when love transcends the boundaries of species. As they walked hand in hand toward their morning duties, Daniel felt the magnitude of what they'd committed to settling into his bones. This wasn't just a marriage or even just a diplomatic alliance. It was the first step toward something that could change the course of galactic history. Through their bond, he sensed Zelia's similar realization, along with her fierce determination to make their union a success. Together, they would face skeptical governments, navigate complex political waters, and work to build the peace their people desperately needed. But more than that, they would explore the depths of the connection they'd forged, learning to be not just husband and wife, but true partners in every sense of the word. The lonely princess and the duty-bound captain had found something neither had dared hope for, a love that transcended worlds, species, and the very boundaries of individual existence. As they entered the briefing room to face their first day, as truly bonded partners, Daniel squeezed Zelia's hand and felt her squeeze back. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them as one consciousness, one heart, one soul perfectly joined across the vast darkness between the stars. The diplomatic marriage had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams, but the real adventure was just beginning.